Welcome to the Rusted Garden Homestead and today's Friday morning ramblings. This is the snow tour. I love the snow. I love watching how the seasons change my garden. And we're going to talk about really garden design, something you can maybe, get a few tips as we walk around for what you may want to do in your gardens next year. And I'll just show you some of the things that I do here at the homestead. I am training birds. When it snows, I give them a little more food. I'm training birds to know when I put food out by ringing a bell. Now, I have a mental health background. This may or may not be true for birds, but if we associate the sound, that is no bell. The snow must be messing it up, but it's really a nice loud ring. But associating the ring of the bell with the bird seed being put out, the birds typically do come around pretty quickly. So this is my homestead, and if you don't like tour videos, you probably don't want to watch this. So we'll walk around. I'll show you a lot of what's going on. And let's just start over here. When designing your garden, you want to make sure it gets at least 8 hours of sunlight. You can work with less, but it's not going to be really going to be that rewarding if you're struggling with sunlight. So the sun always comes up behind my left hand here and it just tracks around. So you really do want to figure out where you get maximum sun. 8 hours or more is key. Now, you don't need a garden this large. I don't want people to be overwhelmed when they watch garden videos and say, I'm not going to be able to do all that. You can start really small. You can start with a couple of containers. You can start with a 10-foot by 10-foot plot. You can start growing indoors and maybe just do herbs. Anything to kind of get you out there and started with growing is what I hope that you do, because you're going to find out if you like it or not. If you start small, start with plants inside, start with pots outside. If you enjoy it, you're going to be inspired and you're going to do more. So this is an area that I just cleared out the left. This area was cleared out for future projects in 2021. Dropped down some containers, large containers, fabric pots and stuff like that. And I think I mentioned in the last one, I'm going to be growing ginger in here. I get a little bit more shade. You can see how the shade is falling because of these evergreens. That's okay. This space does open up and gets that 8 hours of sunlight. And this is about 16 feet by 16 feet. You can start with something small like this. It doesn't really have to be fancy. It fits in a 4-foot by 4-foot raised bed there, covered in the snow. That is, I believe, a 6 by 4 raised bed, another 4-foot by 4-foot. And you can see mixed in there, I have containers back in there. I even have a place for compost in the corner. So 16 feet by 16 feet is plenty to start your garden if you want to start with something a little bit bigger. A fence does help if you have deer. Here's a kind of a tip. This fence is not tall enough to stop a deer, but deer don't want to jump into something just like people where they may break a leg. So by putting some compost stuff over there on the left, containers over there, that's my mushroom garden on the other side of the fence. And even if they were to jump into here, they're going to land on uneven ground. They're going to stay away, unless of course they're starving. So you don't need that 8-foot fence necessarily if you kind of have a strategy on how you build around the fence down at the bottom and depending on what you have on the inside. I mean, they just don't want to jump into that. I think this is perfect for someone who's just starting a garden. It's big enough that you can get tons of food, big enough that you can expand, yet small enough that you can manage, with probably about 8 hours a week taking care of everything. If you have help, even better. But this is just one option. Some trellising options. Doesn't have to be pretty, as I say. Just a couple of 8-foot stakes in the ground, string going across, and you can have a great garden. Now let's look in right here. Now this is, my large garden, and it's designed to give options for all of you when I'm kind of walking around. But also I like having the change. I like walking in over there on the right side, having fruits, containers, and then coming down the main path here, having the different raised beds. And then when we get down there, I'll show you some other options. But there's all kinds of different ways you can have a garden. And in fact, say you just have a strip of land Those are sunken containers, which means they're the bigger nursery pots. Ask family, friends for extra pots when they bring in plants. Go to nursery. Sometimes they have pots that they're throwing away. You cut out about 50% of the bottom, sink the pots halfway into the ground, and then you just put your good resources right into the containers. I've grown peppers and kale in here for the last 2 years, but I've been using these sunken containers forever. The point is that you can just make a straight line. That's probably at least 20 pots, and you could fill those with pepper plants, kale plants, tomatoes on the end, and you can just have a single strip garden like that, and it's not a lot of work. And again, start small. If you enjoy it, you can expand. Compost is wonderful stuff, but you need the room to collect the resources or keep the resources, and you also have to have the resources on your property. So if you can't start with composting, don't think your garden's going to be a fail right away. You know, I just got this set up over the last 2 years. I'll probably be able to do 75% of my garden with compost this year. But my other place, before we moved here, you know, I had very little compost. Sometimes I would use chemical type fertilizers. Sometimes I would use organic fertilizers. Over time, I moved more to organic 90% of the time. But I don't want you to fear using the chemical fertilizers. They don't harm you, they don't harm your plants, and if you really over abuse them, they can damage your soil. But we all have different budgets. And the chemical fertilizers are cheaper, and they will grow wonderful vegetables for you. And over time, maybe you move more towards the organic gardening, which can be a little more expensive, and maybe you start your own compost pile or compost bin. This is a no-dig garden. This is about, I don't know, let's say 12 feet by maybe 8 feet, maybe 14 by 10 feet. This was just where I put down 4 to 6 inches of compost. Under that was cardboard to kill out the weeds underneath, and I grew all kinds of stuff in here and didn't put a lot of effort into it, but the plants grew really, really well. Underneath that, there's lettuce and spinach, turnips, which I think will be perfectly fine once the snow falls. There's just a quick look at the rest of the property, which slowly but surely I'll be building something in the wooded area. I found a bunch of foundations there that are old, and I'll be clearing that out. Here's a cold frame. Here's a good tip. If you have a cold frame, don't forget to put the top back on before the snow comes, but those plants should be okay. Again, maybe you don't have the money for a fence, or you're not able to build a fence. These are a couple metal raised beds that I got online. They don't exist anymore. They were on closeout. You can drop a few beds like that. This was to protect a small space. That's just a circle in there. I did a video on that. I mentioned, I think, in the last Friday morning ramblings. That was good enough to grow 2 tomato plants, 2 pepper plants. Anybody can do that. You know, I'm just using leaves to help build the soil up for next year. Nothing fancy. And you, again, can start something small like this. That will keep the rabbits from getting in there, won't stop the deer, but you could raise the chicken wire up higher if you needed to. But it's a nice, simple way to get a garden started. And I guess my point, and I wonder, what are those tracks, do you think? So again, I guess another tip is, of course it's winter, is make sure you close your gate if you're using a fence. I don't know if that's a cat or a fox or something, but it looked like it took a nice tour around the garden. You can get fabric pots. These are 150 gallons in the middle, 100 gallons on the end, and then it's a mix of 5, 10, and 20 gallon pots. I sell them at my seed shop. But this is a space that you can grow a full garden in. You can put this on concrete, you can put this on wood. If you have a little bit of extra money, you can pick up these metal raised beds, there's no bottoms in them, and just drop them down. So that's 3, I think these are like 3 feet by 6 feet, maybe 8 feet. Those are fire rings over there. No bottoms in those. You can pick those up for about $45, and you can just plant them. And this is perfect for a family of 4. You know, just stick it in a corner somewhere. Now, it's going to be a little bit harder to see. We'll go over to my other garden. It's inside my front yard fence in a second. But these are all raised beds in here, going all the way out. Hard to see. You don't have to frame out the beds. I like doing that because You can concentrate your resources right in, let's go over to this one, right into, say, the rectangle right there. And you don't have to step in it. Because your arms are 2 feet long, you just walk around the 4 foot by 8 foot space, tend it, you put in all the good resources, it saves you money. Now, come spring, when the cold is gone, the warm weather starts rolling in, these frame beds and these raised beds will warm up quicker, so you can plant in them a little bit sooner. Here's something that I have cauliflower under there. I don't know if we can get in and see it or not. Yeah, it looks like I didn't cap the outside. This is an ongoing experiment, but this is just a way to make a nice little cold frame around cauliflower, broccoli, and other leafy greens that can take a frost during the winter. Of course, it got down to like 22 tonight, or last night, so we'll see how these did. But this is a test area. Before I really do a video on this, I like to test out the designs, make sure that they work and stuff like that. So this is a rather large garden. Let's go over to the smaller one. Actually, let's take a quick walkthrough before we go over to the other garden. I just want to encourage you, of course, get a garden started. I've said that 1,000 times. But really to be creative and to have fun. Use your imagination. Like, I like coming out here, and this isn't necessarily practical, you know, as a homestead, because I got so much going on. But I really enjoy sculpting the earth, creating with nature, and I sit back, you know, really during December, January, and kind of imagine what this is going to look like. What if I move these trellises over here? Or what can I grow up this? Or what kind of plants will complement each other? What kind of flowers can I bring in here? These are remains of sunflowers that seeded all over the place, if you saw some of the videos from the summer. I'm probably not going to let that happen as much, but I'm going to take sunflowers and put them in other parts of my acreage so that I can just see them all the time. But, you know, just even coming through here, thinking about what's going to be growing up the cattle panel trellis there. I was putting determinate tomatoes. I just couldn't eat them all. So I think that's going to be more for melons and cucumbers maybe. You know, I think I mentioned in other videos, like I had stuff scattered all over the place. So one of the strategies I'm going to be using is this might just be where I grow cucumbers. So I can tend cucumbers with sprays and stuff as needed, rather than kind of pop all over the garden and all over the homestead. But be creative, you know. I encourage you to take risks. Don't worry about what other people might say. Don't worry if you're going to fail. You know, there's not that many naysayers when it comes to gardening, but there are a lot of people, if you're watching videos, that'll sort of yell at you if you're not 100% organic. Or if you use a chemical fertilizer one time, you know, you would have thought that you did something terrible. Don't let those people bring you down. Use garden videos, use books, use friends, use the community as a way to find inspiration and pick what you like. Blueberries, blackberries, you can grow fruits if you don't want to grow vegetables. This is a nice space right in here. And I think the garden just lets your mind work. Gives you a great mental exercise to pass the time, be healthy. Imagine what you can create, imagine what you can do, and you're going to feel good. You know, share your successes, share the failures with, you know, people that are interested, even some of those that aren't. Nothing wrong with talking about gardening with those that are just, you know, nodding their head. But this is, you know, an opportunity for you to use life and do something that you really, really enjoy. And what I enjoy, of course, is gardening. Let's go over to that other garden I was talking about. So this is my other garden, right up on the deck, bunch of containers. You can do a container garden. That's going to be next year where I grow all kinds of different herbs. It's only going to be herbs. It's not going to be a repeat of tomatoes and leafy greens and stuff I have in the main garden, but I'm going to be able to walk out my door and just pick whatever I want for cooking right off the deck. There are a couple of beds in here. These are remains of tomato plants, 4 foot by 4 foot, 4 foot by 8 foot, another 4 foot by 4 foot, and you get the idea. But you can just drop raised beds along here. If you don't want to build raised beds, you can just grow right in the earth. I mean, there's so many different ways to do it. This is plenty of space for a family of 4 or 6 to get, you know, tons of vegetables to kind of supplement your meals. Goji berries, that's really beautiful. I didn't pick them all. I'm getting more than I need, but they're awesome. And again, same design as the deer aren't going to really hassle to jump over a fence unless they're starving if you have something in their way. They're just going to walk by and go somewhere else. You can set something up around your shed. Those are raised beds in there. I'm growing mostly lavender, rosemary, perennial flowers. And you can tuck the gardens, your garden beds, in different places. You don't need a formal space. You know, use the space you have. I mean, just one frame bed right over there would be perfectly fine. The sun, as I was mentioning, tracks around this way. It's early morning, it's about 9 o'clock, and the sun ends up over here. So this gets full sun. Drop down your beds accordingly. Underneath here are my septic tanks. Now, I have to be able to lift that up, so I designed some decking that would go on top of those to cover them up. You could do a container garden right on top of that. Don't use extraordinarily big pots or anything like that, because you have to be able to move them so people can get to the septic tanks when needed. But you can cover the tanks and you can have a garden. You can do something like this. If you don't have a lot of earth, you can do this on a deck. You can do this on a balcony, and that's just a place to grow different flowers and different herbs. You can maybe do some greens in there, you could do strawberries in there, but you can at least get the feel for gardening, you know. Get something started, get something growing, and learn. The best way to learn is by doing. If you just spend a lot of time reading, watching videos, which is great, you're not going to really know until you go out and give it a try. And then finally we come back up to where we started. A couple of birds are around with that lame bell ringing. But I really want to encourage you to take a look at the space you have, get some gardens started, get growing, see if you enjoy it, and if you don't have the space, but you have family or friends or neighbors, talk to them. You know, gardening is about community. I love talking with all of you and seeing what's going on in your gardens. Maybe you can use their space, use their lands to have a garden, and you can take care of it. So they give you the space, and you give them some of the produce you produce. Hope you enjoyed the video. I think that's enough talking for today. And I just want to encourage you over December, January, February, start thinking about maybe expanding your garden or starting your first vegetable garden. Thanks for watching, and please check out my seed shop at therustedgarden.com.